Hey everybody, it's Jeremy. Welcome back to Tournament Game 7, where we are playing Helheim. This is turn 77. It is the last turn of the game. And yeah, let's jump in. Okay, so there's not really anything to go over. Rejoice, a true god has ascended. Congratulations to Toll. They did a great job playing Calum. Very fantastic. So, rather than like, what I want to do on this turn, right, is I want to actually talk about a little bit about how the game went, some of the big points in the game, some of the things that I feel like I learned, some of the things that I feel like some of the big mistakes that I made, right, etc. And just kind of like do a dissection of the game overall. About like 15-20 minutes and just talk about things. So. Let's kick things off at the start, right? So I think there's probably 4 or 5 big points in the game where I learned a lot, or they were the big important turning points in the game for me personally. And some of them are things that I did really well. Some of them are things that I did really poorly. Most often, they are a mix of the two. But the first thing is actually before the game started, and I think it is probably the single, maybe not the single worst, but one of the worst things that I did, and it set the tone for the entirety of the game going forward, and that is our bless, right? What kind of combination bless scales, right? Like they are hand in hand, but I think there are 2 different points in them that are very important. The first point is the bless itself was too non-committal, right? Let me take a look at our bless. Can we bless? Yeah. So we went magic weapons, shock 10, poison 15, fire 10, cold 10, reinvigoration 2, HP 1, and blood surge, right? So this is a very kind of generic rainbow bless, etc. Very good defenses across the board. And the idea that I had was that, I want to use my Van Jarls as Ultra Raiders and make them super hard to deal with, etc., etc. And that in and of itself isn't a terribly bad idea, right? But it's an unrealistic concept to think that early wars are going to be won without the intimidating strength of the Hellherding, right? So this is basically the concept of like a bless for a Van Jarl or Van Heer, right? Versus blessings for Hellherdings, right? And this bless is very just generic, right? It does provide good things for a Hellherding. It provides good defenses, etc. But Blood Surge is not great on a whole bunch of Hellherdings, right? It'd be much better if I had just like strength. And the reinvigoration, same type of scenario, right? Would be way better if I just had increased damage. The cold resistance as well, right? Like how common is that going to matter in the early game? Not more often than not, right? So that's would have better suited for defense, etc. So we get into this situation of kind of like, this bless was a low commitment rainbow bless that didn't really service my main strength, and that being the Hellherdings, right? So what I should have done was I should have had a bless that was more committed towards the Hellherdings. And I also think that I should have had either a more aggressive bless, right? Where I had more power invested into that bless, maybe doing something like we did a imprisoned pretender, maybe doing like a dormant pretender and really, really hitting hard on some of the like incarnate blesses. Like actually getting some weapon blesses or something like that. Or doing something like a Barkskin Incarnate Bless could work pretty well. Or there are a number of different things that I think we could have tried that could have been pretty strong, But even if we didn't do something that was incarnate, even if we did something imprisoned, just doing more combat stats and less resistances, and again, Blood Surge, right? Blood Surge is that thing where Blood Surge is really, really good on thugs, and it's really, really good on super combatants, right? Partially because it gives them additional reinvigoration, which means you have to rely on gear less for your reinvigoration. Because as long as you're killing stuff, and you should be killing stuff, then you should be getting additional reinvigoration. But it's significantly less good on a whole bunch of units because all of those units need to get kill, etc., etc. So, I think our Bless was the first mistake. We should have targeted the Hellherdings, and we should have gone either more aggressive or we should have gone less aggressive. That's actually an option. And I've seen this since, right? I'm actually doing this video well after the end of the game, with a bit of like research and playing around with things, but you can actually play Helheim pretty damn effectively going scales, right? Because you can actually utilize, or going pretty much scales, because their Hellherdings still kick ass, right? And as much as I slandered mounted Herdmen earlier, if you can afford a shit ton of them, then they're just fine, right? Nowhere near as good as like a Hellherding with a Bless, but still, you know, if you're dealing with Hellherdings without a Bless, then mounted Herdmen are just fine, right? So I should have gone one or the other. I should have gone harder into the Bless on Hellherdings specifically, or I should have, you know, pulled back and not have been. And that's part one of the Bless scale scenario. The other thing, and this is very specific because I could have done a more aggressive Bless and still done this thing. I could have done a less aggressive Bless and still done this thing. Either way, now I know I absolutely should have done this thing. And that is not take drain scales. I have since come to learn and understand and identify a little bit better about research and its functionality in portions of the game, breakpoints within the game, research efficiency within the game, quality versus quantity in the game. So Helheim is absolutely a quality nation. Way fewer options, way fewer mages, way more expensive stuff. And because of that, it means that amassing things is way more difficult. If you are going to go drain scales, you have to be able to mass mages in order to counter those drain scales. And this isn't an or, you know, because I went into this game thinking, or you can use research aids to supplement. No. Here, but the thing is everyone is going to try to use research aids. Everyone in the game is going to try to use things like imps or owl quills or skull mentors or lightless lanterns, right? Everyone is going to try to do those things. So if you are drain and you're trying to use that as a catch-up, well, everyone else is going to be using it as a booster, so you're still that much further behind. And if you are quantity, or quality rather, so you don't have the masked mages and you take drain, you're even that much further behind. And that's basically what we did, was we got, because we had magic, or because we had drain scales, we were unable to, even with the research aids that we were utilizing, we were outstripped, outpaced on research horribly. And that has to do with more than just that. That has to do with things like the amount of land and income that Calum had, and the time that they were given. But this is also a discussion of things that aren't Calum oriented, right? We take Saramatia. Saramatia got up to Horde of Skeletons way faster than we were able to get to anything, right? And a good portion of that was because they had magic skills and we did not, right? So that is something to keep in mind. And I've grown a little bit more understanding of that type of situation. So our bless and our scales right out of the gate put us at a disadvantage in this game. So and I think that was the single thing that kind of like kicked off the whole game for us. Obviously, it's the the build that we chose for the game, but I think with what we decided to do there, it was always going to be unlikely for us to win. I actually think that I did pretty good, all things considering what we were working from, and how things went in the game. I think we actually did pretty okay. So next up, the next kind of like big thing, and this was actually I think the start of the game really for us. We expanded well. We did, well, I say well, we did okay. We didn't do great. We had a couple of mishaps, but none of those were like make or break moments, I think. The thing that kicked off the early to mid game for us and the trajectory of our overall game was the choice between attacking Marverni or attacking Saramatia. And I've heard people give me reasons why I should have attacked Saramatia or Marverni instead of Saramatia, why attacking Saramatia was a good idea, blah, 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 etc., etc. And I'm sure you could argue both over and over and over again. But I will say this. At the end of the day, at the end of this game, I think we actually made the right choice between Saramatia and Marverni. I think we attacked the right target. It was very clear that Marverni was already on the back foot, that they weren't doing well, right? And that if we attacked Marverni with Saramatia, all that would have achieved is us having a little bit more land and Saramatia having a little bit more land, and then we would have to again try to figure out, okay, who do we go after? And then we would have had a large, powerful Saramatia on that list, which is not something that we want in any way, shape, form, or fashion, right? So I think the target taking Saramatia, because I knew that if we did well against Saramatia, and Marverni kind of rebounded, that would still be a weaker Marverni for us to go after later than it would be Saramatia, So for that scenario, I think we made the right choice. What was wrong, obviously, and this is probably kind of like, this is the beginning of the end for us. As far as like, could we have done better? And that is missing Snow Move, right? Like the miscalculation on Saramatia's capital, missing Snow Move when we were on Saramatia and they were on Glimmering Fields. I miscalculated the movement because I didn't remember that they had Snow Move on their Sacreds. So that allowed them to hit me on Saramatia and wipe out a good portion of my power. A whole bunch of Hellherdings, etc., etc. And that was a big deal. That was a really big deal. That loss meant that the war took another 20 turns. When, had we just pulled back, had I calculated that correctly and been like, he can hit me here, this is a problem, because we'd fought against his Oi Rapadas before, right? And we knew that they were better than we were. But we could have just pulled back and continued to raid him down and then built up our forces while he did not have the ability to build up his forces, and we probably would have been just fine. The war could have probably been over in another 5 to 10 turns. and instead, like I said, it took another 20 turns, but I think it took like, we started the war, yeah, it took like another 20 turns. It took like, well, 20 or 30 turns, basically, because it turned into this long chain of grinding, raiding him down. He actually came back and took a whole bunch of his land back, pressured me back down, and then we had to like raid his lands down with the assistance of Tirnanog, and none of that really needed to happen if we had just not screwed that up. And so there's more to that impetus, right? Not only did it delay the victory against Saramatia by 20, 30 turns, it means that allowed Calum, who at that time was going in against Agartha, to then finish Agartha and then turn against Marverni. And by the time I was done with Saramatia, it was actually about right about the same time. By the time I was done with Saramatia, Calum was done with Marverni, and that was the beginning of the end, right? Had we correctly calculated the snow move and not lost the massive battle on Saramatia, we probably could have beaten them in another 5 to 10 turns or less, and then turned on the already weakened Marverni, and then it would have been us that was... Well, honestly, it's very unlikely that we would have been able to take it all, but we would have been able to take some of it. Tirnanog would have jumped in. They absolutely would have taken some. Calum probably would have taken some. But then we would have had Calum with 2 caps and some Marverni land, me with 2 caps and some Marverni land, Tirnanog strong-ish with Marverni land, etc. And we would have had a much better path forward to victory, right? So that's that situation. The next big moment, big mistake, this I think is basically 100% a mistake, is that after all of that happened, right, we finally finished off Saramatia, we got into the war with Calum, right? Tirnanog, Femoria, us, all at a war with a 3-capital Calum, and that was okay. That's not the problem. The problem is bad diplomacy. And I knew this was happening, and I kind of just let it happen. I could have tried harder. I should have tried harder. Been more diplomatic, been more conversational, been messaging people consistently, etc. to try to keep Femoria and Tirnanog engaged in the war with Calum. As soon as Femoria and Tirnanog got out of the war, that was basically the end of the game. At that point, Calum being unopposed for so many turns after that with 3 capitals, with 3, not even just 3 capitals, but legitimately like the entire territories of 3 nations. Right? Because it's one thing if you're like, oh, I've got two territories and a capital. You know, okay, whatever. No, it's 3 capitals and 3 entire territories. And I'm up next with like, 2 territories. And that's why, that's why I'm the one that Calum ended up super focusing when the time came, right? Is because I was the next biggest threat. Had I focused on that diplomacy, bribed or paid or cajoled or threatened and made Tirnanog or got Tirnanog and Femoria to stick into the fight with Calum, it would have taken a long time. It would have been brutal. It would have been grinding. But we would have been able to take Calum down. I honestly do think that would have been the case. You can see it, right? Like, we were having success in the raiding against Calum to begin with in that war. It was going it was, I don't want to say it was going well, but it was going, right? It was forward progress. Had we continued with Fomoria's assistance, with Tir na Nog's assistance, I think we would have been okay. We still would have had to watch out for Abyssia, and Abyssia's potential throne rush is one of the reasons why Tir na Nog got out of the war with Calum. But again, I think that was good diplomacy on Calum's part and bad diplomacy on my part, right? Because Tir na Nog and I could have jointly worked against Abyssia and probably been just fine without having to leave the war against Calum. That should have just been a conversation that we had. I should have just been like, look, Calum's just trying to get you out of the war. They're trying to get you to focus on, and they're trying to get you to basically do the exact same that Abyssia is doing and go for a throne rush and get focused, and that's not gonna work out for either of you. Calum's gonna win in the end. I should have tried harder on that diplomacy. I didn't. I let it slide. And kind of on the backside of that is when Fomoria and Tir na Nog went out, I should have just stayed in. I should not have, and it would have gotten me killed. It absolutely would have gotten me killed. But I should not have left the war with Calum because it allowed Calum peace for too long, right? Had I stayed in the war with Calum, I could have continued to raid them. I could have continued to threaten them. They would have raided me just as much. They would have raided me better. But if the rest of the world, if Abyssia and Tir na Nog and Fomoria had seen, oh, Calum is starting to eat Helheim, maybe, right, it's kind of like trying to pull them back in, right? Maybe they would have been like, okay, we can't let this happen. Everyone attack Calum, right? So that's kind of like the Hail Mary of, after failing to keep Fomoria and Tir na Nog in, I should have just stayed in with the hopes that everyone would see, okay, we have to go in or Calum's just going to win at turn like 50, right? Instead of turn 77, Calum's just going to win at like turn 50. So that's another big scenario. Number 4, and this one is something that I am really bad at as a player. I am not an aggressive player, and I need to get better at being an aggressive player. I hit a couple of breakpoints throughout this game. Namely, the biggest ones were with the Ice Devils, where I should have hit that and then been like, okay, time to kill somebody, and just fucking gone. Like, I should have just been like, okay, time to kill Fomoria, go. Okay, time to kill Tir na Nog, go. Okay, time to kick things back off with Calum again, go. Because I didn't hit those at great timings, right? But when I hit them, there were still fewer things left in the game to deal with them. Had I attacked someone swiftly with them, then I probably could have benefited greatly from how strong they are. You saw, I mean, we saw them in the fights against Tir na Nog, in the fights against Calum, right? They were incredibly potent. They did work. If I had attacked with them 10 turns earlier on someone like Tir na Nog or Fomoria, I might have been able to just bowl those nations over and then suddenly be... I think at that point it still wouldn't have mattered. It still would have been too late, right, to catch up to Calum. But it would have been better than what we were doing, right? So there's that. Just learning power points, learning power break points, and understanding, hey, I just hit a thing that's really, really good for my nation, right? Like, it's like your Horde of Skeletons scenario, right? Like, I'm Sarmatia, I just hit Horde of Skeletons, let's fucking go, right? Or I'm Marverni, and I'm attacking Urmor, I just hit Solar Rays, let's fucking go, right? Like, let's do this shit, right? it's understanding where your power comes from in a battle or in a war, and what you're trying to accomplish with the nation that you're playing, and how strong you are with that nation and at that power point. It's understanding those things that allows you to take smart fights. It's kind of like I don't know, if you're into like MOBAs or anything like that. It's one of the ways that you can come from behind, right? Or extend a lead. And that is you have to understand what your power points are. This level, this item means I am very strong and I can force this situation, right? So, Ice Devils, 3 Ice Devils, fully geared, means I can obliterate these 3 armies, and that's gonna really kick things into my side of the war, right? So it's that kind of mindset of understanding where your power comes from and when to flip the switch and go. Really need to work on that, but this game has been a good lesson for me in that, I think. So there's that. And then I think the last big thing for me in this game was the overcommittal. And this is kind of like the flip side, right, of things, right? Sometimes, I say sometimes, more often than not, I'm not aggressive enough. But sometimes I'm too aggressive. And one of the last little thing was the overcommittal to Tirnanog, right? My mindset when we went to war with Tirnanog was that I have to get this done. I have to get this done quick, and I have to get this done hard, and I have to obliterate them as fast as I can, because Kalem's gonna come at me. Helheim is absolutely gonna come at me. And that was true. That was correct. But the problem with it was there was almost no way that we were going to take Tirnanog out fast enough to be successful and then reposition against Helheim. So all we ended up doing was putting ourselves out of position versus Helheim. Now, I think at the end of the day it would not have mattered, but had we had, 100 more Hellherdings back at home and 2 more Ice Devils back at home when Helheim decided to attack, then we probably would have just died anyways, but we might have been able to defend ourselves a little bit better, right? We went too hard against Tirnanog. We could have just hit, raided, gobbled things up, but kept our power base secured, kept our land secured against Helheim, and forced Helheim to be like, okay, Helheim, either you're going to respond while we're ready, while we're on the defensive and we're ready for you to come to us, or you're going to have to go against Tirnanog, or you're going to have to let us slowly eat them, and see how the situation unravels from there. So yeah, that's I think those are the biggest points in the game for us. Obviously, there's a game 77 turns long. There's so many things that happen, so many little minute details, choices to move to this province instead of that province, a bunch of different crazy things that go on. But overall, all things considered, I think we did okay. I think we had some really fun wins. I think we pulled out a couple of good battles here or there. I learned a whole bunch about the game in general, about movement, and about how teleportation magic works, and about how sneaking works, and about quality versus quantity nations, etc., etc. So I honestly, I had a great time with it. I do think Helheim did a boss job. They did very good. Toll, I have since learned, I believe, is actually a very respected and really good player in the community. So exciting that I lost to them. Good job. So yeah, pretty fun. I'm looking forward to doing this type of thing in the future. Looking forward to understanding more and learning more and having interesting games like this. I feel like every game I play with Dominions, I get a little bit better. But I think some of my biggest things are... Some of my biggest issues are just not being... I love this game. I've put hours and hours and hours and hours into it. But it seems like when I say this, that it seems weird to me to say this. But I'm less committed than a lot of other people are to this game, right? Like at any given time, I'm only playing like 2 or 3 games, whereas I know a lot of people are playing like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 games at a time, right? And I try to intentionally limit myself to only playing a certain number of hours of Dominions every day, because if I don't, then I will only play Dominions and I'll ignore a lot of the other stuff going on in my life, which I don't want to do. But I don't think at the end of the day, I know this about myself as a strategy player, I don't think at the end of the day, even if I just put more time and effort into the game, that I would be top tier player. Like I think there are players like Toll or Lucid or other players, right, that are incredibly skilled. Perun, right, are just incredibly skilled at the game, and they're always going to be a step ahead of players like me. But I don't think that's a problem necessarily. Like, you don't have to win every game to really enjoy the shit out of a game. And I really enjoyed the shit out of... I had a blast with it, honestly. So looking forward to playing another nation like that. I am hoping... I've got a couple of other games going right now that are probably going to be a little while. But the next time... I don't know. I don't know when the next time I'm going to play like a quality elf nation is going to be, so... But I am looking forward to having an opportunity to putting some of the things that I learned into action in another nation. I'm actually playing... This is gonna date when this video gets recorded. I'm actually playing Chaco in a big DE game, and I feel like I've made some of the same mistakes with them that I did with Helheim, but I'm also quicker to respond to some of those mistakes because of what I've learned here in Helheim. Anyways, this has been a great game. Thanks for watching. If you actually made it through all 77 of these episodes, good on you. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next Dominions game. Bye, everybody.